Hey everybody, welcome back to Sloth Fab Garage. Tonight we are going to be working on setting up the front coilovers in my Wrangler. So as you can see, we've kind of got a whole bunch of openness here, and it is time to finally get to filling that. What I'll be using for coilovers are these 14-inch remote reservoir Bilsteins. They are the 8125 series, 2-inch diameter, or the 46 millimeter, whatever you want to call them. And this is basically how they came, one per box, not two. I just condensed a little bit, but those are what's going in. And I've got some hoops here from Rough Stuff. I was going to build my own hoops, but for the price, it was kind of hard to beat these. They are offset. You can see one side is longer than the other side, so I can make them flat if needed, or kind of set them however they need to be on my frame. That's kind of why I went with these. They came with tabs and bolts and everything, so that was a really good deal for that. I'll throw a link to those, and those I guess, in the description for this video. These are gussets that I formed up, and these are also going to act as my axle side mount for my coilovers. So if we take a look here, these are going to sit right in here, and something kind of like that. They will get welded in place here, proper distance apart, and then there'll be an eyelet right about, I don't know, somewhere about here, as close and as high up on the knuckle as we can get, and that'll be the lower side mount for my coilover. Hopefully these can get it up and out enough to get all the angles and everything that I need. If not, I may end up redesigning these, or basically plating the top and building a mount off the top of them. We'll just have to see how it goes. So I guess the first thing that we are going to do is take out some of this inner fender. You can see here where my old shock towers ran through up into the engine bay, but if you take a look from the side, my axle is quite a bit farther forward than it used to be, so my shocks are probably going to end up sitting, I don't know, somewhere right about here now. So we're just going to go and take a big chunk out of this. I built these fenders, they're all aluminum, so I'm not really too concerned about making it look pretty or anything like that right now. I can replate, weld in, and grind out and smooth everything out when the process is done, and you'll never know where old stuff was. So we're going to do that. There's not really anything in the way up here because we're moving from there to here. So I guess we're just going to cut these out and then start fitting stuff up. After getting some of the fender cut out, the next thing that I did was set the axle to full bump. And I'm working with blocks right now. Some of my jack stands are out on loan to buddies, but this ended up working perfectly. The height that I have it set is even both sides, and I'm at right where I would want to be for full bump. You can see, if we look in here, everything is close, but nothing is touching. My closest thing is actually the crankshaft pulley there to the top of the truss. I don't know if we can quite see how close it is there. It's about 5/8 of an inch, and I may do some things to provide myself a little bit more room there. Probably notch out the truss just a little bit for worst case scenario applications, but we are at full bump, which is great, which is where I want to set up those coilovers. And the reason for that is I need to determine my shortest possible length. And what I've got here is I stuck the coilover in my press and compressed it down to this bump stop here. And I don't plan on running this bump stop. I plan to run a much shorter one on here, but I'm using this bump stop, which came with these, for a reason. This bump stop's about 2.5 inches tall, maybe a little less, and that's where I want to set this coilover at, the axle being at straight up full bump. And the reason for that is because even though the axle is at full bump all the way up, when it articulates like this, this corner is actually going to come up more. So I don't want to have the shock at full compression here, because it would be bottoming out when I articulate, and this end actually comes up further. So we're going to work with that number to start, and that number eye to eye is 24. And just based on my rough measurements here, that's going to be almost perfect. So I've got the hoop in here, just kind of set in there, nothing's tacked or anything like that. And this piece of angle is mimicking roughly where my coilover would sit. So as you can see here, we've got a couple degrees of angle front to back, and then we've got also a couple degrees of angle inwards, and that's going to give me a lot of stability and good rebound having it like that. And it should also provide, hopefully, enough clearance that as this axle drops and comes in, hopefully that will provide me enough clearance between the frame and the coil over here at full extension, because we are at the shortest. This is going to be the farthest out. This is going to be anything from here down. That shock is actually going to crowd into the frame as we move down. So this is why we test stuff. This is why we cycle suspension before we do anything. So for right now, I think what I'm going to do is get the welder set up, and I'm just going to tack boop boop on those 2 points, and then I'm also going to tack up the gussets here and see where those are going to sit, and see where my shock is going to sit within those, so that I can actually start mocking up where everything is going to be. And once I have both front ones in, then I can work on making sure everything clears through all of the movement of the suspension cycle.
Before I welded the gussets to the axle, I wanted to use the drill press and make my holes in them. So I took all 4 pieces and ran some tack welds on them to hold them together, and then I put them in the drill press and was able to drill basically one hole through all 4 pieces. That way I knew that everything was lined up really nicely. Took a little bit of extra time, made sure all the shaping was nice on them so they were all the same, and then I found some nuts and washers that I could run between them and space out those gussets just the right amount so that my coilover would slide perfectly in between them.
We have gussets. So as these are multifunction pieces, they do function as a gusset. So I centered that right on this upper C here, and you can see that it kind of also functions as a mini truss for this little piece of tube here. Just wanted to tie everything together as much as I could. So that's going to be really strong, and I may end up plating a little bit down here. Just we'll see how everything goes. I may run a plate from here all the way over to the actual truss or something. We'll see how much room I actually have once this is all put together. Hopefully there's enough room in here to clear the knuckle. I think we should be good, but we will find out. Now that's drilled out, you can see that I used those spacers in the middle to set the distance. So that's in, and this is again kind of mocking up where the coilover would actually sit. So we've got that good angle there, and we've also got a decent amount of angle here. This is a little exaggerated perhaps, but I'm not entirely sure. Right now it's on the back of the hoop, and I may just end up running it right there. My concern would be clearance to the power steering pump reservoir right there, although if necessary that could get moved as well. That doesn't necessarily have to sit right there. That angle does look pretty nice, although I am concerned about that angle when it when we droop. That may be a little bit close to the frame, so I think what I'm going to end up doing is swapping that to the outside of the tube here and allowing that to have a little bit more clearance to the
With both the gussets and the hoop in place, it was time to start mocking up the tabs onto the hoop. Now, you'll see me put a shock in here, and I've seen people use pieces of tube or all kinds of different things, but I had a spare shock going around, and I just used some wire and tied it to the appropriate length that I needed. And that gave me a really good idea for the size of the body of the shock, as well as the location that I was going to need to mount those tabs.
We are mocked up. So that's kind of what we're looking at angle wise from front to back. And this one's not quite as much as I was hoping for, but there is a couple degrees of angle on there yet, actually. Let's see exactly what it is. Zero it out on that. About 4, oh, you can't see that. It's about 4.5 degrees, depending on how I roll this. So I was hoping for closer to 10, and there is a chance that I could roll these mounts a little bit, shorten them up, but I'm actually okay with 5. The way that this is all coming together, working really, really nicely, I don't mind that. And I could certainly stand up this tube a little bit more and get a couple more degrees of angle, but I don't know, it gives me quite a bit of room between the shock and the frame. I think this is where I'm going to call it for tonight. It's getting pretty late, so I'm going to do a quick little cleanup. Well, I didn't quite get it as far as I was hoping to, but I did get it probably another inch over, maybe a little bit more. We had about 2 to go before, and now we're at about 3/4, so about 1.25 inches. I moved it over, so the outside edge of the tube is basically in line with this, which is nice because that gives me a reference point for this side. I believe that they are the same side to side. I don't remember off the top of my head. I'll have to double check that to be sure, but that did help, definitely. You can see now this is at full bump, and I have more notable angle on here. Before, even at full bump, it was actually almost straight up and down, and that's not ideal. At full bump, I'd like to see more angle than this even, but we get what we get. We don't have a lot of room to work with here. So I am really, really close to the steering column right there. I kind of stopped when it hit and then came back just a little bit. I did just stick a little plate on the side right here to help stabilize so it can't do this on its own. It was a little wiggly with just a tack there and there. There will be a brace run between the two of them for sure, so I won't have to worry about deflection that way. But I think that's where we're gonna leave it. So I'm gonna go ahead and tack all this stuff in a little bit more, run a couple more tacks on the gussets down here, and probably cut my pieces for under this side and that side. Take some measurements, get everything good, double, triple, quadruple check to make sure that it's where I want it, and then take one of these bad boys and actually stick it in there and see what it's like. And if that all is good, if it all clears, everything looks nice, works good, then we will take some measurements on the fender itself here and start hacking up that side, I guess. So let's start building. I'm really happy with the way that looks. So that's kind of set up. That's where it's going to be. I'm pretty happy with the mounting locations, the angles. I did compress this all the way. My angles are steeper than what I'd originally started with. So everything's doing pretty good. We got room in between there. It's looking really good. I'm really happy with this. Not entirely sure what I'm going to do with these. I may end up rotating them up and looping this back over and running them across the support brace there. I don't really know where I'm going to put them yet. I don't like when people put them on the outside of the fender well, or I guess inside the fender well. I don't know. On the outside of the vehicle, in the fender well, I guess. I don't like when people mount them in here. It's just asking for problems or to get dirty, and I don't like that idea. I do like the idea of keeping them away from heat, but I don't know. Maybe I'll build a cool little mount right in here, because I do plan to punch some holes on the side of the hood here for breathing, so maybe I'll mount them here and have air for that. I don't know. We'll see. That's down the road. But this is pretty much together, which is awesome. It looks like I may have to do a little bit of clearancing on the corner of this bracket, which is totally fine. I can cut almost an inch off of here, kitty corner across there. I should have plenty of room to the frame here. Overall, I mean, my angle's fully compressed, fully open, nothing is binding. Overall, really good. I'm gonna have to open up a little bit more in here because we don't quite have the room we need right there, but that's not a big deal either. So now the next thing is to take some measurements and basically replicate the whole process over on this side. The fender well is cut out roughly to clear everything here. I've got it lined up about the same. I'm going to be using these 3 little holes here as my reference mark, and I have checked that off of other points, but that's a really good mark for me to use. I was planning on using the engine mounts where they're welded to the frame, but then I realized those are not in the same spot on both sides, but these holes are, so I'll be using those. So that's roughly where that's going to sit, front to back and side to side. These radiator support braces are not in the same place. I believe I'm going to end up having to go like this rather than like that, which is how it is on the other side. So I'll throw an angle finder on that and get that all lined up properly and take some measurements off of the fenders back to those to make sure that they're even. But my problem right now is that, I don't know if we can see, actually pull this right on out of here. Right at the back of this tube where it meets the frame, there is a ground right there, and that's factory ground as far as I know. I believe that, yep, that's the engine ground, goes right up here, and that is going to be basically right in my weld path. So we're going to need to find a new location for that, and I think what I'm going to end up doing is just backing that bolt out and either putting a little hole into the side of the engine mount here. I don't really see any reason to go anywhere else, so I think that's what I'm going to do. I'll just drill a little hole here, tap it, and move that over here. That should be out of my way enough, and then we can get to tacking this one in place. And once that's in place, we can kind of go ahead and start working on mocking up the cross brace here. Well, I just made a really dumb mistake. Not a big one, just something funny. I welded the hoop on, tacked it a couple places, so that's good to go for testing. And I went to put the gussets on, clamped them together like I did with the other side, welded everything on, and didn't really take that into account. So now it's so close. If I could go another maybe 1/4 of an inch, I'd probably be able to get it. But now I get to pull my drag link instead. So here we go with that. Well, we're back at it. I've got my tube clamps now. They just came in the mail today. These were just some that I found on eBay, and they were very expensive, maybe 20 bucks a piece, I think. I'll throw a link to those in the description. But these basically key together like so. Bolts run through, able to remove that tube, which is great. Exactly what I'm going to need for here. I did throw this across just to see it is going to be a little tight on there, unfortunately. So I think what I'm going to do is take one of these and mount it kind of at a upward angle, like so, not straight across, probably at a, I don't even know, maybe a 30-degree angle upwards. And then I'll just put a slight bend in the tube right after here and right there, and we can make a connection. So what I'll do is I'm going to take 2 little pieces of tube, maybe I don't know how long. I might end up even just notching these just so they can sit right on there. But I think I'm going to end up doing a piece of tube. So I'll take 2 little 1 or 2 inch pieces of tube and put a bird's mouth on those so that they can get attached on here. And then I'll get both sides, take a measurement roughly in between, bend a tube up a little bit, and then once everything is in place, I can tack it all together, then pull it in final weld. Quick explanation before I do the final cut on this tube. I have it bent, even bends, and I bent them 5 inches in from each side, so it was evenly bent. I didn't know exactly the distance between, so I just made it long, and then I basically just held this up between the 2 pieces and lined everything up. I have marks every 1/2 inch on both sides, and I just figured out where they were going to be in the middle. Well, the bar's in place, and it is looking pretty good. Welding it in was actually not too bad. This side was pretty good. There's not really anything in the way. That side was a little bit more difficult just because the power steering pump is right there to get underneath, and on the back especially. Those ones weren't quite as pretty, but everything is in, and I just loosened this to make sure that we weren't too tight. Everything looks like it's going to be great. So, next thing and last thing, before we move on to paint, is I am going to do some gussets in here. So I'm going to do a little triangular gusset here and another one right here, same on both sides. And once I've got that, then that really should be it for these hoops and for the coilover mounts in general. And then everything can get welded in completely and painted.
my audio got distorted on this last clip here, but basically the gussets went in great. They lined up well. The welds turned out very nicely, and everything has kind of pulled the whole project together and kind of brought everything to an end. So the last thing to do is basically just repeat the process on the other side, finish all the rest of the welding, and get everything painted up. So as always, I appreciate you guys watching. Like, subscribe, leave comments if you have questions about the way I did things